Hello everyone, I hope you guys are well. In this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to create realistic looking fabric materials. This will be a very fun and informative tutorial, so you sit tight and let's get started. Before we get into it, I wanted to just show you guys the result which I had in preparation of this tutorial. We can see this fabric, how soft and good it looks. I don't know how scientifically accurate it is, but overall it just feels soft. It looks quite detailed. I'm going to flip to another render where the exact shaders are the same, everything is the same. The only difference is one is using real geometry displacement and the other is not. So basically, to get the best looking fabric, using real displacement really helps with that. But you could get a decent result with just using normal displacement. You still get the soft look and it still looks okay and faster render time. But if you're looking for high quality displacement, let's go ahead and set that up. I'm going to go ahead and delete all those materials, and this is what we should have. So first thing, we'll just add our simple principle BSTF. You can go ahead and name yours. Next, what we want to do is to get the texture we use to displace, basically the cloth pattern texture. So let's quickly load that up. I have that saved in my fabric, so I'm going to be using this one. And here we kind of try to scale it down with the texture coordinate. The way I did that, if I delete this, if you select your material node, your texture node, and press Ctrl T, you should have this nice feature of the node wrangler. It creates the coordinates for you. So I'm going to set this to like 50, just eyeballing it to kind of see how it looks with the fabric. And once you're happy, we're going to make this a displacement material. I'm just going to temporarily make this a bit darker so we can be able to gauge the displacement. Now I'm going to plug this here and let's add a displacement node. So the color, we go into the height. Right now we're not having true displacement. That's because we need to go to the material and tell Blender to make it have true displacement. Here you are going to see the surface and the displacement. So right now it's saying it's only bump only. So I want it to be displacement and bump. And here we go. We kind of see the mesh being displaced. So what I'm going to do now with the settings, I'm going to set the mid level to 0. And then for the scale, I will do 0.02 to kind of puff it out. Let's go 0.07 to really see the displacement. We are not really seeing it being displaced really because the subdivision level is set, the viewport subdivision is set to 1. And the render is set to 3, and this is a pretty dense mesh created with Marvelous Designer. So I'm using the viewport of 1 and the render of 3. You could easily use the adaptive subdivision. I could easily get away with just using the default subdivision, so I'm just going to leave it as supported, but it's just an option if you want to use that. It works either way. Yeah, so we have our displacement set up, and now we can test the render quickly. So the render is done, and we can see it's a bit too much, and also I need to brighten this slightly so we can see more. I'm going to reduce this to 0.04, and let's give it another test. Okay, so as you can see, it's looking much better. The only thing is the cloth it feels very hard. It doesn't feel like soft and cuddly, especially for the cotton material. So let's do that. Before I continue, I wanted us to talk about what makes a fabric, basically. So we are looking at, apart from obviously the details which you could get from the folds and from the knitting material, what makes clothing soft. So we know that they are transparent. Most cotton clothes materials are transparent from the stitching and everything. So there's that. We have transparency, and next we have absorption of light. So we need to kind of recreate that. That's what kind of brings everything together to make it feel very soft and feel like a real shirt. For the transparency, we already have a texture here that we're using for displacement, and we can also use that to create our transparent material, our transparent shader basically. So I'm going to go into render preview mode, and let's isolate this for a bit. I'm going to move the value and bring the whites very high, and then I will plug it into the alpha, and let's see the material now. So we are getting the transparency, but it's a bit see-through. So for that, there are several ways you could do this. You could use the matte node, but for this I'm just going to use a simple mix color and set this value to before I do that, I want to move the B socket and move it all the way white to kind of tone down that transparency a bit. And also I'm going to set this to 0.6. So depending on the look you're going for, you might want to increase it, especially if you don't have a character, the full character body underneath it like we do here. So let's go 0.65 just to make it less obvious that, or make it less obvious that it's see-through, basically. Okay, so we have the transparency working for us. The next step is getting that feeling of absorption of light. So we will do that with two techniques. So the first technique is using the layer weights node. Okay, so I will duplicate this mix value node and plug the layer weight as a factor, and then the result into the color, into the base color. So what this does is it kind of gives a very nice fall off. So you don't want to plug in the Fresnel, you want to plug in the facing. So it gives a nice fall off to the fabric. So if we have blue, you can see we have some orange kind of bleeding in, and you can play with the blend factor to determine how much do you want that bleeding in of that simulation of light to feel. So if you find something that works for you, I went with 0.1 because you don't want it so obvious, especially since we'll be using soft surface to simulate more realistic softness and basically translucency. Okay, so let's determine the color of our clothes. For now I will go with what I did for the final render, kind of a dark blue. Okay, and then I'm going to copy this color, so you can drag in color and just drag it here. But for this we want to desaturate it a bit, so it's a bit whitish. Not yet satisfied with this color, but we'll see. Okay, so once you're done, the final step is the subsurface. So you can increase this value to what you want. So right now it feels like milk or human skin or something, but we want to change it from random walk to this one, Christine's, I don't know how to pronounce that. Yeah, so you just set it to that, and you can go crazy with it. You should note that the more it is, the less obvious the displacement will be, which is appropriate for most part, since you don't want the displacement to be so obvious, but this really helps tie it together. So let's go with something 0.7. Okay, then importantly we have the subsurface radius. This is basically the color that the light will bleed out when the light passes through the material. So right now it's set to skin, which is red, reddish, somewhat orange. You can adjust that color with, if we use the RGB and plug it into the radius, so we can determine what color bleeds out of the cloth material. So you can just play with it. White typically is ideal, since you don't want it to really have any other color that it's not from the diffuse or the subsurface color. You just want it to feel soft, basically. So you just play with different colors and see what works for you. And once you're happy, your material is set up, you could go extra mile to add like the specularity roughness, but typically you can just turn the specularity to 0, except maybe it's like a wet scene or something of that nature, sorry. Okay, and now we can give this a render. So there you go. We have the cloth looking and feeling soft like fabric. If you have like custom textures, you can just plug it here and everything will still work. So I think the subsurface scatter is a bit much, so we'll reduce it to like 0.47, and I will probably increase the displacement from 0.04 to for mine I left it at 0.1. It's not going to matter so much because we have the subsurface kind of softening everything to kind of give it that cloth feel. And we'll give it another render, but this time I want to try a black shirt. So we can change that and put this here. Do something like this, and let's give it a render. Okay, so it's done, and this is the result we get. You can decide to go in and tweak the values based on how a particular color influences it. So for this, I think the subsurface is a bit much with the dark material, so you could go ahead and reduce that, and it's a bit darker. So depending on what the material needs, the color needs, you kind of address it. It's probably not one and done for most part with animation stuff. So you could choose to increase the displacement so it's a bit rougher, and you render. So that'll be for this tutorial. I hope it was helpful. I hope you kind of picked up a new trick. Of course, this is more intensive than a more simpler shader, but this gives you a more realistic looking result. So that'll be it for this video. I hope it was helpful. If you enjoyed this video and wish to see more from this channel, please hit the subscribe button. Yeah, so bye bye for now. See you next time.